This is Judge Joe Brown, and we're listening to We All Be News, news-free Dixie for the 21st century.
And welcome back, family, or black family, to another wonderful, special Resurrection Day edition of your favorite entertainment program. The Artivist presents We All Be News and Radio. I'm your host for the empowerment segment, Brother Ron, also known as R2C2H2, the Artivist. And we got a great one for you all today. Today's topic is After Ferguson, Race and Class Bigotry at Washington University in St. Louis. Once again, today's topic is After Ferguson, Race and Class Bigotry at Washington University in St. Louis. Please feel free to join the conversation. You can call us directly, area code 646-652-4593. Once again, that's area code 646-652-4593. And if you're scared to get on the air, we'll open up the chat room shortly, and you could type in your questions, your comments, your observations, and we might read them on the air. So this is a very important conversation, and we definitely believe in freedom of expression and of speech and all that stuff on We All Be Radio. But we also believe in not being held liable for anything our guests say. But that's why we could do what we do, because we believe it's very important that people have a platform to express themselves and point of views without being marginalized for it. So it's so important that we tell our stories on our own terms, and that we have the platforms and the means to get the story out there as well. So we're about to go into this, family, and it's going to be a great topic, because I'm actually am an alumnus. Let me sound educated. I am an alumnus of Washington University in St. Louis, and I got my own stories as well. But we got the man of the hour, a true extraordinary person. I call him the Thomas Paine of his generation, because what he's writing is common sense, but it ain't too common among some of our people. But now's the time to get it done. It is the zeitgeist, the spirit of the time. Welcome to We All Be Radio, first-time guest, very accomplished person, very thoughtful gentleman, the one and only true people scholar, Brother Chris Pepus. Are you there?
Hi, Brother Ron. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I woke up this morning, and I'm talking to you now. How are you?
Doing all right.
Yeah, well, you're doing all right, but what's going on, really? In the words of the great Marvin Gaye, whose birthday was this past week, what is going on at Washington University in St. Louis? You have a story to tell us, right, sir?
Yes. Well, see, basically, as you know, I worked at the film archive there for a number of years. I was there for about 9 years. And over the years, I've done a lot of freelance writing, and I do a lot of research into class bias in the country in general, and I have a blog called Against Class Bigotry. And I've been writing about class bias in higher education for some time. And over the years, it's become clearer and clearer that WashU is kind of exhibit A of class bias in terms of admissions. They've consistently been at the bottom of lists of economic diversity among top colleges, lists that are derived by looking at the number of or the percentage of students on campus who receive Pell Grants, which is as you know, a federal grant for low and middle income students. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of a weird it's a roundabout way to look at social diversity, because private colleges aren't required to tell very much. They don't pay taxes. Places like WashU, they're exempt from tax because they're nonprofits, but they're not required to say anything really about social diversity that the public has to see. So if people are trying to find out what's going on with regard to diversity in social terms at a place like WashU, they're obliged to look at the federal Pell Grant program. And it's not a perfect measure by any means, but WashU is consistently very low on that. They're ranked. They have 6%. The latest federal data, 6% of WashU students receive Pell Grants. And the comparison I made was to the University of California at Berkeley, where they had 36%. And so I don't see why, if WashU has much more money in terms of an endowment than UC Berkeley does, and that's true, if UC Berkeley is able to have that many Pell Grant students on campus and still be one of the top universities in the world, and that's true, why is WashU lagging so far behind? And so they came up with a plan in January which they said they've been talking for some time about saying we're aware of this problem, we're going to try to fix it. And they came up with a plan that said if we give them 5 years, they'll get up to 13% Pell Grant recipients in the freshman class. And I just thought that was a grossly inadequate plan. I mean, they're essentially saying, give us 5 years, and we're still going to be very low. They have an endowment over 4 times the size of UC Berkeley's. I don't see why they certainly don't lack the money to do this. It's certainly not a question of the merit of low-income students. They could certainly admit a higher number and still be a very highly rated university. In fact, I'd argue that it would improve them if they would reach out to talented low-income students, because that's a very large, underserved community of people in America. But I thought that was inadequate, and I thought that, in particular, I mean, there's been a lot of press saying they're trying to get out of last place. Well, the truth is, if you look at the U.S. News and World Report rankings of the economic diversity at the top 25 colleges in America, according to national universities, as U.S. News calls them, if you look at the top 25, WashU is in last place by a good distance, and in fact, the nearest one is Caltech at 11%, with 11% Pell Grant recipients. And so the fact is, they might well still be in last place 5 years from now, even if they follow through on their goal to get to 13% Pell Grant recipients in the freshman class, because they might still be at 10, 11, 12%. And if Caltech and the other schools that are just ahead of WashU in the rankings, in those rankings of diversity, move up even a little bit, WashU will still be last. I don't see why any institution with that kind of money can't get into a 30% range, which is where UC Berkeley is, with much less money than a lot of these rich private schools like WashU.
So you actually made a ultimate sacrifice in terms of your salary and career, right? I mean, you actually resigned from WashU over this?
I did. I felt that I've been trying to raise these issues. Well, there's a couple things. I mean, I've been trying to raise these issues in my own writing. And, I've been working at WashU, and I hadn't been challenging the administration on what they were doing. And it was really wearing me down, because you'd see these announcements in The Record, which is the official WashU publication, and also in the student newspaper, Student Life. And the administrators would say things about how they're committed to improving the situation and they're committed to diversity, and it would really it would irritate me immensely. And eventually I just got tired of biting my tongue and saying, well, I would try to compromise myself. I say, well, I really need this job. If I raise a lot of trouble with them, I'm going to have a hard time finding another job. But and I kept saying, well, I'm still writing about this other stuff. I'm just not writing about WashU. And my perspective is that those things I can't separate those anymore. Those things have all converged. I can't be somebody who's trying to raise this issue and remain silent while working even in a very low-level staff position at a university that is actually the worst on this score among top universities, and is pretty happy staying that way. Meanwhile, at the same time, the administrators are constantly patting themselves on the back of their commitment to diversity, which is really fake if you're talking about social diversity. And in particular, I've been offended by some of the things that the high administrators have said about low-income students, because they've really been trying to they've been offering excuses for why they haven't improved social diversity before now, and the sorts of things that Provost Thorpe, Holden Thorpe, who's the fairly recently hired, the last couple of years anyway, provost, he's made some comments essentially saying that, well, we didn't deal with social diversity, but we focused our efforts on making the place better and improving quality instead, and making WashU the place that it is, he says, is the way he put it, and trying to improve the university generally. And I really objected to that, because that's a false dichotomy. You're saying we could either have diversity or we could be a better university. And I think if he had said that about, say, hiring more female faculty, if he'd said, well, we want to hire more female faculty, but we're really worried about getting to be a better university instead, I think more people anyway, would have realized that was offensive and that was wrong, and he would have been embarrassed to say that. Well, he ought to be embarrassed to say that about low-income students as well. especially when you look at the data that I discovered that showed that there are a lot of low-income students who are very talented but don't go to college and aren't being recruited by top colleges. And the point I tried to make in the letter in that section was to say, if WashU's really very interested in moving up academically and having academic excellence, they should be looking for underserved students who can come here and contribute a great deal academically, and there's a great pool of those students among low-income students, because a lot of top working-class students are not being recruited by other top universities. So that's really where they should have been looking if they wanted excellence, and instead they're trying to pretend that they couldn't really help working-class students get into the student body because they were too worried about improving the university in general. And I think that really showed their mindset, and that really showed that false perception is what's governing their actions, and so I'm not surprised that they're in last place in terms of social diversity among top colleges.
That's very interesting. I mean, do they have any programs in place to address that issue? I mean, I know it's like they lack a will or desire to really change the status quo at WashU, but are there any programs that you know of that are in place right now that are not being pushed in terms of the diversity issue?
Well, I know that they've tried to work in terms of getting. They've set up some. I don't know the exact. Can't remember offhand the exact title of it, but there's a program where they're trying to reach out to a low-income youth in the city, in particular, St. Louis, and try to reach out and start doing some more recruiting locally among low-income students. And that's nice, and that's similar to what a lot of other major universities have been doing. But we have to recognize that alone isn't going to be a cure-all. Because, I mean, Harvard did this in 2004. They set up something they called the Crimson Academy, where they would bring low-income students on campus, and this is going to, improve diversity and everything. Well, you know what? They did that in 2004, and then in 2008, they were, if you look at, there was a study actually done a couple years later, but based on data for 2008, Harvard ranked 49th out of the 50 richest universities in terms of social diversity that year. So they set up this program in 2004, and it was going great guns, but, 2008, they were still 49th out of 50, the 50 richest schools, as ranked by the Chronicle of Higher Education. And again, that study actually came out a couple years later, but it was based on 2008, 2009 academic year data. The only reason, incidentally, Harvard wasn't in last place that year is guess which school was last?
Oh, WashU?
Yes.
Wow.
So I don't know whether Harvard sends Christmas cards to WashU, thanking them for always making sure that Harvard's not last. Maybe that they should have done it that year. They definitely should have done it.
Well, it sounds like to me they competed in terms of this diversity issue, that WashU is like the Mississippi or Alabama of educational diversity.
That's a good way to look at it. And the longer I've been here, the more I've thought of these parallels to. And I think we were talking about Ferguson when you called me to be on the show the other day, and it's one of the things that I think we all know is about Ferguson, and people in St. Louis kind of knew this already, but I think it was pushed under the rug, that there are these local municipalities. They're like these they're like plantations or old aristocratic fiefdoms where the same people have been running the show for however many years, and the same local business people are in charge. And increasingly, I see that as being the case in St. Louis, that you have these small municipalities and small and even big institutions too, where you have a handful of wealthy donors and wealthy business people who kind of have administrators who do their bidding. And I've started to come to see WashU in that same kind of light. I think a lot of what's going on here is that donors are not interested in social diversity, and the university is only having to do something about it because they've been embarrassed again and again over this, even though I think the criticism that they've gotten has been very gentle from the New York Times and the Chronicle of Higher Education. I think there could have been a lot more aggressive. I think, I'll put it this way, I think if their lack of racial or gender diversity was as bad as their lack of social diversity, they would have quite rightly been called, they would have been called supporters of racist policies, supporters of sexist policies. There would have been a lot of talk of institutionalized racism and sexism, and that talk would have been right and it would have been well-founded. But it seems that even among people who are liberals in the media who are very quick to talk about those sorts of issues, and commendably so, there's real reluctance to make the same kind of imaginative leap or the same kind of intellectual understanding that there's a bias here that's systematized too, and it's based on class. And it's really ingrained in the institution, and you have to look at it very thoroughly. And this didn't happen by accident. I think there's a tendency to see lack of social diversity as something that's accidental, or that it happened in a fit of absent-mindedness, or they just didn't try hard enough. Well, I think it's something a lot deeper than that, and I think we should recognize that class bias is another type of bias that can really mar an institution the way race and gender bias can.
That's very interesting you said that, because I remember the Supreme Court ruling when they reversed some of the stuff as it relates to affirmative action or race-based admissions. And on WashU, first they held out on changing their policy as it relates to affirmative action from a race point of view, but they gave in ultimately, saying that, I'm paraphrasing now, that, they get money from the government, so they have to comply with the government wishes in terms of the affirmative action ruling, which was given by the Supreme Court of the United States. So, I know that WashU is a private, but it's a nonprofit, as you say, and they get subsidies from the government. Can the government hold them accountable in some type of way when it comes to class-based admissions, like they did with the race-based admissions? Is there possible?
Yeah, that's what I think we just need to take. This is the thing that's really frustrating for me, is that and I've been talking to some friends about this, and mainly, friends that come to me and say, I'm really worried about you.
Right.
What are you going to do now? So after that we get over, I'm really worried about, your financial situation, Chris. We get on to the subject of what I was doing. And I've talked to a lot of friends about this, and I've been emphasizing the point that we don't really need to reinvent the wheel here. That's the thing. We've got these policies on hand that deal with race and deal with gender. We can apply the same types of policies here. And I'm sorry to say it, but the only guy who's really been pushing this, and he kind of dropped it, is I can't believe I'm even saying this, but Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa actually has raised the issue of tax exemptions for wealthy private colleges that are not socially diverse. And he's about the only, and he kind of let it drop. But this is a normally very conservative Republican senator who raised this many years ago. And I'm really wondering why we don't have progressives in the Senate and progressives in Congress in general, in either house of Congress, who are willing to come forward on this, because we have a method for dealing with this, and we can handle it now.
I guess it's the will. Like you said, it comes down to the will. And do you see yourself, like you said, people are worried about your financial and career situation. Do you classify yourself or see yourself as a whistleblower?
I think it's a tough question, because it's not. It wasn't things I saw in my own department, and so it's really just things that I guess in a way I am, because I'm raising this issue that nobody else will raise. But the things I'm citing are public knowledge. So right. I kind of wonder why it has to be me rather than say reporters or the press, or I'm kind of wondering where the press has been on this, because if you look at the links that I put in my blog post, these are federal statistics. They're statements by WashU administrators. They're studies by scholars. Any reporter for, say, the New York Times could have done what I did and pointed all this stuff out before. And in fact, I've been emailing back and forth with the Times since I posted my blog post, trying to get them to fix an error in their article on WashU and diversity, and they won't do it. So I don't know what the problem is. Basically, the issue there is that WashU, as I mentioned, has said that they're going to get to 13% Pell Grant recipients in the freshman class by 2020. And it's just a freshman class. Now, the New York Times article says that it's going to be the student body as a whole, or the undergraduate population as a whole, 13% will be Pell Grant recipients. That's simply wrong, and they won't fix it. I've put it up on the blog, my correspondence with them. I don't know what why they can't fix it or why they can't straighten it out is pretty self-evident if you look at the numbers.
Yeah, but it's like all this media stuff, like New York Times, they're known for propaganda. Like they do a lot of different things in the media. And in the media also, this corporate media means the bottom line is more important than the truth or the fact.
Yeah.
It's the money,
Yeah, and I think that's really been, and I feel a lot of, I'm very upset with a lot of the well-to-do liberal writers that we see, because, you don't expect conservatives to be raising this kind of issue. This flies in the face of of the sorts of things conservatives are generally talking about. Even though Chuck Grassley is apparently the only guy in the Senate who managed to notice this, or the only guy, I think that goes back about 10 years, that whole story about him. But why isn't The Nation magazine on this? Why isn't Mother Jones in this issue? Why isn't and what I keep coming back to, and I wrote about this a little while ago, if you look at the profile of the people who write for the New York Times, who are columnists for the Times, they're overwhelmingly graduates of elite private institutions.
Right.
And I think a lot of these journalists, there are institutional connections as well, but I think there are a lot of individual journalists who went to places like Harvard and Yale and Columbia, and their kids would qualify as legacies. And so they don't seem to be too interested in attacking legacy preferences, which these preferences for children of wealthy donors.
That's interesting. And somebody raised on Twitter the point, we mentioned the 6%. He want to know, where does the 6% come from, as you talked about earlier?
Oh, that's 6% of WashU students are recipients of Pell Grants. So the Pell Grant program is a program for it's a federal government program for low-income students, and it's become expanded in recent years. As I mentioned in the letter, it includes a fair number of middle-income students as well. The eligibility expanded a great deal since 2006 in that program. So that's really the only benchmark we have, since essentially all of these private institutions, they're able to they don't have to tell you the average income of their students. They don't have to report that to the federal government. They don't have to tell you what percentage are below 40,000 or below 20,000 or whatever. They don't have to tell you how many have parents who are manual laborers versus non-manual. They don't tell you any of that stuff. So in order to find out anything about what they're doing in terms of social diversity, the one way that journalists have picked up is to look at the number of this is federal data, so they'll tell you how many Pell Grant recipients are at any particular school, and then you can do the math for that number versus the total number of students, and you'll get a percentage. So that's where that comes from, and that's really our own. It's not a very good number. In fact, it's not a very good benchmark, but it's the best one we have. And the reason it's not great is because I think it's fine that they've expanded the Pell Grant program in recent years, but it's included a big chunk of the middle class. I think, in fact, a few years ago, the latest data we have, there were actually people from families with family incomes in the $100,000 or more a year range who were getting Pell Grants. So that's something to keep in mind, too, when you're looking at this, because most journalists will say, federal Pell Grant recipients are the poor. Well, there are very poor Pell Grant recipients, and most of them are poor or low income in general. But there's a big chunk of middle class people too, and a big chunk, and even a small percentage of them are in the $100,000 range and above. And that's another thing that frustrates you with WashU, because I look at this and I say, well, they've been expanding eligibility for the Pell Grant program since 2006, and you're still at 6%? How can you be at 6% when there are people with six-figure incomes getting Pell Grants, and you're still that low?
Wow.
But yeah, that's where that figure comes from. And the comparable figure at UC Berkeley is 36%.
Wow. So, but UC Berkeley is also a public institution supported by taxpayers, correct?
Yes.
And WashU is a nonprofit, even though it's private and stuff, it still gets money from the government. So it gets some type of form of corporate welfare from the government, correct?
Yeah, it's WashU in its own way is supported by taxpayers as well. Here's an example. Basically, and this gets onto the issue that I've been raising with legacies, because I don't understand why we haven't had a national debate, and this is one of the things I'm trying to do with my dramatic move of resigning on this. Is to try to get a debate started on this, because I just can't. I can't fathom the fact that we still have these aristocratic preferences for children of wealthy donors. That if you come from a wealthy family and you go to, the best schools and you have tutoring and anything you need and you still can't get in on the merits, you have no business going to that school. I don't care how many of your ancestors went there. I don't care how much money they gave. And if what they always say about legacies, places like WashU and other administrators that practice them, and the Ivy League practices these, they're notorious for doing so, in fact. What they always, we're honoring tradition. Well, traditionally, all the students were white men who were all either straight or in the closet, and they weren't Jews either. So they were Christians. So why don't you have a bias program to help white men who are Christians and who are either straight and who are officially straight? Why don't we have that kind of a program? Because that's who used to be at our colleges, at our top colleges, most of them. Now, and what fool would fail to see that as being discriminatory? But it's okay now that it's rich people whose ancestors went there. I mean, I don't understand why that hasn't been. I guess I do understand why. It's because a lot of the people in the media fit into that social background and are very eager for their kids to get into elite universities that they went to. But that doesn't excuse it, and it really makes a joke out of attempts by a lot of these rich liberal journalists to say that they're for diversity when they won't take this issue on.
I definitely agree with you about that. I was thinking about what Baba Dick Gregory told me on my show a couple of times about the reason why Ivy League schools were created, so that the slave owners can have their dumb white man kids go to college and get a degree. So Ivy League was created for dumb white privileged males. That what his thing was. And also, traditions are meant to be broken because at one point, to be a Rhodes Scholar, you had to be a man. And they changed it. So why can't they change tradition?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And that was I don't remember when that happened. I think it happened maybe in the 80s sometime.
You're right.
But so these traditions can be broken, and the other thing too is that a big part. If you look at some of the scholars who've looked at legacy preferences over the years, one of the things that comes up is a big motivation for these legacy preferences was to give preference to WASPs in particular.
Right.
And if you look at the early 20th century, a lot of these administrators were at Ivy League universities and others they were flipping out about the number of Jews who were getting in. And the way they were looking at it was, look, we can't have a bunch of Jews here just because they tested high. I mean, come on.
Wow.
So that's one of the motivations for these legacy preferences is that maybe the WASP rugby player from Phillips Academy didn't score very high, but since Grandpa and Pop went there, then we'll let him come in ahead of somebody with a higher score who doesn't have that kind of connection. So there's definitely a very strong anti-Semitic element to the origins of these legacy preferences, and that's another reason why it's just astonishing that this has continued today, because that's one of the motivating factors for these was to give preferences to WASPs who were scoring lower than Jews on tests in the early 20th century. And it went hand in hand with other policies. I mean, a lot of the elite universities also had a quota where you could only have so many Jewish students at one time, and you couldn't go above that number. It was set pretty low because they wanted to maintain these ties to these preppy WASPs from the Northeast.
Now, that's interesting. Now, what are WASPs? For my audience, so they know what that is. What is a WASP?
Oh, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. Yeah.
Okay, like the Pilgrims, right?
Yeah.
So the blue bloods.
There's a lot of racial. I mean, there's a lot of very racially tinged, talk that comes. I mean, there's a very good book by a guy named Jerome Karabel, and he was a Harvard graduate, and he wrote a book called The Chosen. And he essentially was. I don't know how he got permission to do this. I don't know whether they. It didn't seem to me like it was going to make them look good. But he went through admissions records at Harvard, Yale, and Princeton for many years, and a lot of other internal records. And there's some really shocking, you look at the early to mid-20th century, there are a lot of these old white Anglo-Saxon Protestant rich administrators from the Northeast saying things like, well, Harvard is about having the elite, and there's a lot of talk, there's almost this sort of eugenics talk to it, where the Harvard gentleman is going to marry the debutante from Wellesley, and they're going to produce the great offspring that will be in charge. And that's why we can't have these Jews running around, on our campus, because that's undercutting this. There's a whole lot of sort of breeding talk and talk about the Harvard gentleman being the true leader and marrying the beautiful young blonde woman from Wellesley. And it's bizarre that you see administrators talking like this, because you think, gee, this is they're talking about breeding an elite, and they want it to be a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant elite. But yeah, back when those administrators were talking like that, the legacy preferences were really being pushed, and it was a way to keep people outside keep people out of Ivy League universities who weren't white Anglo-Saxon Protestants and who weren't rich.
When you said that, I'm glad you brought up Harvard University, because when you excuse me, when you was talking about Harvard University and their WASP practices and whatnot, I was thinking about Joe Kennedy, the patriarch of the Kennedy clan, John F. Kennedy, father, how he had a hard time in Harvard because he was Irish American, and they wouldn't let him in the good old boys club. But yet he ended up becoming a legacy, right? He broke the tradition some type of way through getting money, lots of money, creating wealth, and buying his way into the system. So really it comes down to class once again, to have the ability and resources to buy your way into the class. Or is that possible, to buy your way into that situation of a legacy?
You can over time if you're lucky, and I think that's I mean, the legacies are, I mean, you could just be a donor, and there are instances, and there's actually a very good book on this by a guy who used to write for the Wall Street Journal, named Daniel Golden, and he wrote a book called The Price of Admission. And so this is coming from a Harvard grad who wrote for the Wall Street Journal. So this isn't some left wing radical like me saying this. This is a reporter for the Journal, and he said he found a whole bunch of biases, and one of them was donors. I mean, there were donors who would just give a lot of money who didn't have a connection to the institution, and they get junior in that way. But the biggest example was the legacies who gave lots of money, and that's a crucial point too, because one of the points that he makes in he has a chapter on Harvard, and he talks about what was called the Z list, which is these are people who are so low academically that they'll admit them, but they'll say you have to take a year off. So it's like, go do some Hooked on Phonics or something, or watch Sesame Street. But so these are people who, essentially what the story is, these people are getting in simply because they're too rich and well-connected to be rejected. And he looked at who the Z-listers are. They're kids of donors. They're graduates of the top prep schools with whom Harvard has a close tie, or with which Harvard has a close tie. They're wealthy legacies. And so they actually will. They'll let people in, and it's nicknamed the Z-list. That tells you how good academically these folks are. They'll let them in, and they will say you have to take a year off. And it's just they're too scared to reject them. And another thing also I want to mention that Golden discovered, and he talks about, there was a study by a scholar named David Caron, who in the 90s was looking at legacy preferences at Harvard. And what he found was that if you are a legacy at Harvard and you apply for financial aid, you don't really count as a legacy. You lose most of the legacy benefit, or most of the legacy boost in your application. So it's really, when they say, it's honoring tradition and people who went here, it's honoring rich people who went there, and people who don't need financial aid, and people who've donated money, whose families have.
That's interesting. Wow. That is fascinating. Also, I want to add, too, as you know, I'm sure you know that President George W. Bush, great-grandfather, went to Washington University in St. Louis. He was one of the financiers for the 1904 World's Fair, correct?
This is the Walker family, right?
Right, the Walker family, yes.
Yeah, I think I read that somewhere, I think, yeah. I'd have to check. But, yeah, I know the Walker family, when they married into the Bush family, they were St. Louis. They were a very rich St. Louis family. And so he actually has a middle name from that side of the family.
Right, but also to make the point about Judge W. Bush, he's one of the most famous legacy admissions of all time, because he wasn't necessarily had the grades or the qualifications to get into the schools he was able to get into, but he had the family connection and name of Bush, as we all know who the Bush family is. Very prominent.
Yeah.
Prescott Bush being his grandfather, financier and senator from Connecticut, and his father being George H.W. Bush.
Yeah. And this is the thing, and I mentioned this in one of the blog posts after I posted the resignation letter. But in one of my follow-up posts, I mentioned, I asked him, why do we still have legacy preferences? I mean, this is. There's no question this is discriminatory. This is something that's more out of the Middle Ages. I mean, I'm wondering whether the WashU administrators, for instance, are they confused by their architecture, and they think they're in the 16th century and not the 21st? Because it's starting to look like that. But I mean, Bush actually was asked, and I mentioned this in the blog post. Bush was asked in 2004, do you think legacy preferences should be allowed? And he said no. So these things, we still got legacy preferences 11 years after George Bush was too embarrassed by legacy preferences to defend them.
Wow. But he's a product of that system. He would not be president, or he could not be in a position to become president if he didn't have that type of treatment. And that begs my point.
Yeah.
Why do people think that we live in a system based on fairness? It's obvious that it's all about having leverage and having advantage and having access over other people. It's not about fairness. It's about not even about being competitive. It's about denying certain groups of people access to the things you have. So where do people get this idea that the system's supposed to be fair? I mean, why do people think it should be fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a real disconnect, because I think it's almost as if you go to Harvard or Yale, or you go to one of the elite private schools, it's like you're now sanctioned to do stupid things and still be thought intelligent. And an example I keep giving is David Brooks of the New York Times, who's a graduate of the University of Chicago. And he constantly says offensive and hateful and ridiculous things. Not too long ago he said that Egyptians didn't have the basic mental ingredients for democracy. That's how he put it. And I read that, and I said, when people of my background, when white people who are working class say stuff like that, we get called rednecks and dumb hillbillies and white trash. David Brooks says that, and he gets called NPR correspondent, New York Times columnist, and the distinguished David Brooks. And it has to do with the fact that he's a well-to-do preppy from the University of Chicago, and he's at the New York Times, and so somehow that launders unbelievably offensive things like what he said about, I can't believe that he was allowed to get away with saying Egyptians don't have the mental ingredients for democracy. I mean, I don't even know where to begin with a statement that offensive. But his class privilege is clearly protecting him, and that's one of the things that we see with these kind of biases is that when the people who are 18 years old who didn't really earn their way into top universities, who are getting in because of legacy preferences or other class biases, they're then sanctioned as being geniuses after that, no matter how many ridiculous things they wind up saying. And there are many examples of that we can find in politics and also in media.
I mean, when he said that, I was thinking, because I was laughing to myself. I was thinking, but where did the Greeks learn democracy from? Who taught the Greeks? It was the Egyptians, right? So I was thinking about that. Wow, it's just about what I'm thinking about, Brother Chris. I remember before I went to college at WashU, I remember when the big thing came out about Thomas Jefferson having black people in his family, the situation with Sally Hemings. And I remember looking at C-SPAN. That was at Monticello. And one of the white descendants of Jefferson said, well, we're not racist. We're just snobs. I said, wow, really? Okay, you're not a racist, but you're just snobs. You're just elites, But your elitism and your sense of superiority is not in Mother Nature. It's based on a system that oppresses and represses people who could otherwise be qualified for the job that you take for granted based on your privilege. And I can remember, like you talk about the fiefdom. I remember when I was going to art school back in the day at WashU, and I was looking at the Brookings and stuff like that as the city on the hill, like some Ronald Reagan stuff. And I feel like in the art school we was the peasants. Not necessarily. Because we was at in the valley, and they was on top of the hill. And it was a very elitist way of thinking. But that's America for you. You know, America got this myth of inclusion, but the reality of the history is totally something different.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think if you look at we're talking about sort of the history of Greek democracy and Greek philosophy, and one thing I think is interesting too is that if you look at the history of the Middle East, there are so many cultural advances, and yet there's still this sort of bias against ethnic. If you look at ethnically, I mean, a lot of the people in the Eastern Mediterranean are so related to each other anyway.
Right.
So it's one of the things that I always find puzzling, that there's this sort of you get these sort of Northern European English gentlemen of the 19th century who lionized the Greeks, but who hated Greeks of that era.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
And so, and you definitely see that. I mean, they think, oh, the Greeks are just they've gone to sea, they're now dirty, and they're not smart. And I come from a Greek background, and we've read about these sorts of things. But it's very interesting, these sort of how anybody who achieves something kind of becomes white in history. And I remember, I was talking to Dr. C.T. Vivian about this. I know you've interviewed him many times, and I enjoyed your interview with him. But when I interviewed him, we got to talking about stuff that wasn't even on the subject of the interview, and we were talking about representations of Jesus. And I said, it's interesting how if you watch Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus is a blue-eyed white man with a well-to-do English accent. I don't understand how that happened, and he cracked up and said, "Yeah, it's pretty weird, isn't it?" You don't really see that, but yeah.
But like when you said that, also I was thinking about how you think about people like Mick Jagger, the Rolling Stones, and the Beatles. They went out their way to acknowledge the true originators of rock and roll, which were black men and women who created the genre. But in America, they whitewash it to thinking rock and roll was a white invention. But the folks across the pond, they realized that it was the Willie Dixons and the B.B. Kings coming to Piccadilly Square showing John Lennon and Paul McCartney chords. They realized there was Little Richard coming to Europe and allowing the Rolling Stones and the Beatles to open for him. That paved the way for their success. But America is a weird place. I mean, it doesn't surprise me, because even if you look at that, like I always tell people, behind every great white man is a great black mentor that he stole from. Like I went to Alabama recently, right? And I was just digging this Hank Williams Sr. stuff. I just started digging Hank Williams Sr. He's the king of country music. Come to find out that he paid a black man named Rufus Payne from Alabama to teach him how to play the guitar and to sing. As a matter of fact, his son and the Grand Ole Opry donated a large memorial in Rufus Payne's honor in the cemetery where he's buried in Alabama. The same thing with George Gershwin. George Gershwin idolized black musicians like James Reese Europe that he used to listen to as a kid outside a nightclub in Harlem at just the age of 7. But the person who taught George Gershwin how to play the piano and compose music was a black stride jazz pianist named Lucky Roberts from Philadelphia, who became a millionaire twice over in real estate dealings in New York City. So this is stuff that's been documented, but it's not talked about in the narrative. So even Larry Bird, talking about Indiana and Final Four, Larry Bird said he learned how to play basketball from the black man. It taught him that. So this is something America is really interested in hiding. So they'll make it ironic that St. Louis and WashU have these type of practices, because that's the land of Dred Scott. Dred Scott is not buried too far from WashU. And what happened in Ferguson. So this is like the thing that's left undone and unsaid a lot of times.
Yeah, and I think it's getting back to your building off what you just been saying and getting back to your point about Jefferson. I mean, I went to UVA, and so there was I knew people. That was for undergrad, and I knew people who were had done they would give tours of Monticello and stuff like that. And it had only been not too long. I mean, this was quite some time ago, but it had only been not too long before this. This would have been the early '90s. That they actually started acknowledging slavery at Monticello, because they'd say, yes, Mr. Jefferson had helpers, and the helpers lived over there. Now let's get back over here and look at his book collection, because there's some real fun, and it was something they actually had to finally face up to that they were trying to put away the. I mean, they wouldn't even say slave; they'd say helpers. He had helpers who lived over here, so.
So they could glorify their rapists, but they demonize Bill Cosby. I'm going to go on from that. I just wanted to throw that in there. But we'll get to a call. Got a caller been waiting patiently on the line. Okay. And 314, y'all on the air. Welcome to We All Be Radio. What's your name?
Hi. This is Sharon.
How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, Sharon. How you doing?
Kind of happy about your topic, and I wanted to share something. My daughter. I'm originally from St. Louis, but have lived away for a long time. But my daughter was applying to college at Washington U. And, you know, she had good grades, had a little bit of scholarship, but we don't have money. Mm-hmm. Now, at the time, you know, years ago, my dad went there, but I never told them about that. And I couldn't understand why they wouldn't accept her. You know, I mean, we needed more help because even with the max amount of loans, you know, you just can't make it.
Right.
At WashU. Now, she's blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and I got on the phone with the administration, and as God is my witness, the lady said, we don't want you here. If we don't want poor people here. I swear to God.
Wow.
That's what she said to me.
Wow.
And I was in shock, you know, that she was so ignorant that she would even say that. You know, I mean, a lot of people think it, but she said, we don't want anybody here. Because I kept giving her all these arguments, you know, that she couldn't come up with. She couldn't give me an answer for. So she finally said, well, we don't want anybody here who can't afford to pay their full, you know, the full amount.
Wow.
And this is back in 97. So I guess it was about, I don't know, $40,000 a year. About that time. She ended up going to SLU there, but and went on to law school, and she applied at Howard University, and you know they wouldn't even look at her because she was white. So I really think the problem, she went to law school at CUNY in New York, you know, civil rights law, and loved it. It was the best decision for her. She now works in New York for you know, family court, prosecuting child abuse and neglect, and you know, but that's her. You know, I mean, I was a single mom back then since they were babies, and it's not always race. I really think the biggest problem is the poverty. For years, I've told my daughter we need to get that into the Constitution. It needs to be a protected class because there is so much prejudice against the poor. And I wanted to see what you guys thought about that. Just share that. You know, WashU came right out and said they didn't want us because we were poor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple points there. I think on the I do think we need to expand civil rights laws to include social class, and I'm not really surprised that somebody at WashU would have said we don't want poor people here. Some of the statements they've made correspond, I think, are pretty close to saying that. With regard to Howard, I you know, from everything I've read about Howard and everything I've seen about it, they don't discriminate based on race in their graduate admissions. So I wouldn't want to you know, I mean, I don't know what the circumstances are of that particular particular.
Right.
But the non, you know, they do. I mean, the traditionally black colleges have been open to white students and have admitted many white students over the years. So I wouldn't jump to any conclusions about that. Although maybe maybe they made a mistake and should have admitted her. I don't know, but
you know, I don't mean to. I don't want to. I need to clarify. I need to clarify something. I don't think it was her race with Howard. Again, it's poverty. She applied to probably 30 law schools, but because of our income, she applied for that deferment for the admission charge. You know how it's what, $50, $75 to even apply to law school?
Yeah.
If you fall, under a certain economic guideline, you could apply for that to be, what's the word I'm looking for? I want to say diverted, but waived. Right. And I think that was the issue because, she was only accepted to 2 law schools out of, and she had the grade, and but it was because of the waiver. I really think it comes down to money again. I really do, because they don't even, a couple of the schools said they won't even look at them. The kids that are applying who get a waiver, it takes longer, and how you have to get your application in there right away. They don't look at those kids that ask for the waivers or that qualify for waivers until the end. So their class could be all full by the time these kids even get looked at. So there's another poverty, discrimination there with all the law schools.
I would just want to add quickly with the Howard University thing. Howard is an expensive school to go to as well. A lot of black folks can't afford to go to HBCUs right now. They're doing a lot of cuts in HBCUs in terms of financing under the Obama administration, which some people might find ironic because Obama is considered a person of color. That some of the things that's going on with the HBCUs right now and financing is horrible. And also it is a lot of class issues, because when you said that, Sister Sharon, about them telling you about y'all being too poor for your daughter, it kind of reminded me from something from F. Scott Fitzgerald with The Great Gatsby or something. Like, you too poor to marry my daughter. That's what I was thinking about The Great Gatsby. I was like, wow, okay. It doesn't surprise me to say something like that. Somebody from that.
Exactly. But, this woman, the way she talked to me, she probably assumed I never read Great Gatsby or knew anything about it,
Right.
Yeah. Well, and another thing, I think that the point about the applications is a significant one, because there have been a lot of people, there's been a lot of talk over recent years about the early people who apply for early admission.
Right.
And that's an advantage to the rich, too, because if you're sure you want to go to Harvard and you have a connection there, you apply for early admission and you essentially are committed to go if they let you in. If you're a working class person, you need to shop around to see who's going to give you a financial aid deal that's going to be the best. And so you can't be somebody who's going to be in an early admissions. And schools have gone away from early admission, and now they're now going back to it. So they're not even, I think they were trying to make a pretense that they were improving the situation. And they're now reversing that.
Well, it's the same pretense is that you don't have to, if you cannot afford to pay the, admission fee to even get them to look at your record, you can still apply here. But it's not authentic. I'll put it that way, because just like you said, it's a show, because they don't look at those kids until the very end. They told me this.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also come up. This has come up in WashU too, because they've openly admitted, and there were some articles about this not too long ago, that the admissions office will say they'll make a preliminary decision that they want to admit someone, and then they'll have to go and check with the financial aid office if they can actually let them in. Right. And so there will be, I think the last count, the director of admissions has said that only about a dozen cases a year on an undergraduate basis does this happen. But they've openly admitted that they will they'll be ready to admit somebody, and then they'll go from yes to no based on a financial aid decision from another department.
Right.
So you see the admissions office actually admitting doing this, and I think that's not the only kind of bias that's existing.
Right. But it all falls down to, them being allowed to make the decision. If she wants to borrow the money, which she did, she had to for SLU, a lot more. She had to take private loans on top of Pell and Stanford and all the other loans she took. She had to take private. And because it was damn expensive too, you know.
Right.
But she did get some scholarship, probably half, you know, between scholarship and grants. She got probably half the tuition, but that's still $15,000 a year.
Well,
She did, I don't know if she's ever going to get it paid back, but the point is she's doing good work, and you know, that's another thing. Here she is working for the city, taking care of kids, yet she can't get any tuition, you know. She can't get any of her loans, you know.
Well, Sister Sharon.
Yes, sir.
Has she ever thought about doing, I mean, she is doing great work. She's doing community service, public service. Has she ever thought about doing a loan forgiveness thing with the federal government or something like that, like a loan forgiveness program?
Well, they say that they're available, right? But yet she's tried, and they say no, they're not. So I don't know what the deal is with that, because she is doing children. It's, you know, there's a lot of fine print, and you have to be helping kids, but she is helping kids. She does. And yet she hasn't been able to get what in print it says this is available, but when she tried to do it, they say no, it's not available. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, Sister Sarah, I want to thank you for that, for sharing your story with us, because I also want to add this. I know I had a chance a couple of years ago to interview Jeffrey Haas, who was the friend and lawyer for Chairman Fred Hampton Sr. of the Black Chicago Panthers chapter, who got killed by the government through the Chicago Police Department at the age of 21.
Right.
And he told me something that was very important, because he came from a privileged Jewish family from Atlanta, but he went to law school, I believe, in Chicago, I think University of Chicago. But he said, Ron, the reason why we was able to get involved in the movement and do the work that we was able to do is because we came out of college debt-free. We didn't have the debt that a lot of kids have now that try to do the work that we did 50 years ago or 40-some years ago.
Right. Exactly. And, I mean, it angered me so much when she was fighting, because, you know, I fought their whole life to get them in the best schools, and, you know, I called up and said, can I start washing, you know, cleaning toilets and stuff now so she could get into school later? And I did get them great educations, and then they did the rest on their own. But I grew up the same way. I'm white in New York when the riots hit. And I was staying with my great aunt, who was the only white lady on the whole block. And I might have been more like 4. I don't know. But I met this little girl, you know, I was outside playing with her. And this is my first experience with racism, and it was right before the riots broke out. I mean, like a few days. And she and I had become real good buddies, and we're playing, and she's black, and I don't really even know what that is, you know. And we were thirsty, and so she brought me in her house. We were going to get a drink of water, and her family was sitting around the table. And, oh, my God, I mean, they looked at me like, what the hell are you doing in this house? And told the little girl that I was not, you know, I'm white, I'm not allowed in their house, you know, get me out. So that was it. I couldn't play with her anymore, so that was bad. But it was just a few days later, you know, the riots broke out. But I was also, you know, I grew up, my parents, you know, helping with Bobby Kennedy's campaign, even when I was young, and you know, I've always hated racism. But I really, really see this hidden discrimination guarding the poor. You know, I've lived on both sides of the fence, where I was never hungry, and then, you know, another time in my life where I had to give plasma for food for my kids. So I know what it's like, you know.
Well, thank you, Sister Sharon, for sharing your story. Go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you for allowing me to. I appreciate that. I just wish we could do something about, you know, getting the protected class for poverty, you know, get it added in. Because that's where it all comes from. Yeah. I really think it is.
Well, you know, I mean, I'm glad you saying all the stuff you're saying, because yesterday was the 47th anniversary of the death of Dr. Martin Luther King, the killing of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and I'm in Memphis right now. And the last thing he was working, yes, ma'am, and the last thing he was working on was the Poor People's Campaign. And that's why they had to kill him. They had to kill him.
You know what? I'm telling you, even though I was a single mom, all right, I did everything I could. In fact, I took my children to Memphis, to Martin Luther King, the museum there. And it wasn't long after, it was in 93 I took them. So it hadn't even been open that long, you know, but it was, you know, so incredible. And, you know, he would still, my daughter grew up, I mean, he's her idol. And it is so terrible. I mean, that's, I have to say something, though, about, you know, Elvis Presley was the first guy who he refused to work in these the nightclub in Vegas unless they let all of his singers who were black and musicians come in the front door with him.
His what?
I don't know if you know that, but if you're in Memphis, you should.
Well, I heard a lot of things about Presley, man. It's very interesting. He's a very complex person. But, yeah, Las Vegas was segregated for a long time. I mean, they wouldn't let the black performers come through the front door, let alone get in the swimming pool or stay at the hotel.
He was the first one to make that happen. He wouldn't play unless they let all the blacks that played with him come in the front door.
Okay, good. Cause so I thought I heard the N-word a second ago. I hope that I misheard that.
I mean, I let people speak their mind. I don't have no problem with it. I don't believe in censorship at all. I don't. I know I'm kind of strange like that. If I had David Duke on, he could say what he want to say, you know. But go ahead, Sister Sherry, are you finished?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and that's why we have this forum to document these stories. Like, you know, what Brother Chris Pepus, there should be a support group or a network of people that can help you get the word out about things like that so you're not by yourself. Because the worst thing for anybody to feel is to be like they're by themselves doing the right thing. Kind of like Gary Cooper in High Noon, the movie, where he's by himself facing down the bad guys and nobody's there to support him. So that's why I asked you about the whistleblower thing, because I think it's important to note that, you know, in this era, in this Obama administration, there are a lot of people trying to do the right thing that are being penalized by the powers that be for the saying their truth and trying to, you know, putting their careers and even lives on the line for that truth. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a scary situation, and you know I appreciate you being open-minded on the show about you know, because I know the lady has some interesting stories there, and I agree with a lot of what she's saying, but you know I really blanched when I heard the N-word there. I didn't mishear that, did I?
I don't know. I mean, I
thought she was referring to Elvis talking about bringing in his N-words.
I see, black singers. She said singers. Black singers. It's always kind of broke up a little bit with the but you know, I know it was a thing.
I apologize for being wrong about that. Gosh, okay.
Well, you know, it's not the worst. I know people got the problem with the word nigger and stuff like that. It's not the worst thing in the world to me. You know, if I was a white person, if I had all my white privilege and I got white supremacy on my side, I don't have to say the word nigger. I can let the black folks say the word nigger because y'all don't got nothing. You know, think about it. You know, people get mad when like the Kentucky player yesterday, the Harrison twin, when he said, you know, on a hot mic, forget that nigger, where he referred to Comiskey, who was a white player for Wisconsin, the star player, and people got upset. I call it fake outrage. They got mad about him saying that. But that's part of the term, though. I mean, he's a black kid at a one-and-done situation, right? I mean, a lot of them players, like you got these white institutions. What is really March Madness to me is you got these lily white institutions with these majority black teams, players that won't even graduate, and with them making millions and even billions of dollars off these players. Yeah. And a lot of them will never make it pro. So to me, the system is guilty of really symbolizing what niggers are. You know, in my opinion, how you treat people. Like, how can you have 15% of the population be over half of the prison population in the world's largest prison population? So what is that about? Are black people more criminal? Are more prone to nefarious acts, questionable character than white folks are? And like it was like what Malcolm said, who taught you to hate yourself? Or it's like when Mike Wallace did that special on the Nation of Islam, he called it the hate produced. With Louis Lomax, the journalist. So where did we learn how to be the way we are? It's this system. And like when this system can support certain, like for example, I'm gonna get off my soapbox because we got some people that want to talk to you. But when this system can support sending bad teachers to prison for inflating grades, but letting mostly black teachers, you see the majority black teachers for bad behavior, for prison terms of possibly up to 20 to 25 years, and let the Ferguson Police Department, which is predominantly white, which was preying on black people and exploiting poor black working class people, not get one charge against a person. You're telling me that Beverly Hall, the dead superintendent of the black Atlanta teachers, was more John Gotti than Thomas Jackson? We had a killer during Winston. Think about it. You mean they bad teaching qualifies for RICO and bad policing doesn't?
Yeah.
So really. That's something that we got to think about.
I like that construction of being more John Gotti than somebody else. That's a good way to put it. And I think on that on the last call that we were talking to Sharon, I guess her name was. I think she's raising some of the issues, and I think that this is one of the things that I'm always dealing with is coming out of a working class white family. My parents I was raised to be a racist and a religious fundamentalist, and I've always felt that working class whites and racial minorities have been pit against each other to make and to create resentments between us to allow the rich and mostly white elite to stay in power. I think that's the fundamental American story. And so, I think she's raising some issues about that. And, I was kind of worried when she was talking about Howard and saying that Howard was discriminating based on race because, I'm sure that's not true. And I think that's it's important to keep in mind these things because I think that if you do buy into an idea that African American institutions or African American people in general are being, are going in for racism against white people, I think you're buying into the system. And I think it's not that there aren't individual African Americans who might be hateful toward a white person based on race. I'm sure it happens, but I think in general, I have to say, all the experiences I've had, I've had a lot of problems with rich white people, and I've not had a lot of problems with African Americans, and I've lived in neighborhoods that were very racially diverse. So it's always been the rich whites who've been causing the problems for me.
I hear you, brother. I definitely hear you. And this system, it thrives on divide and conquer. No, seriously, it does thrive on divide and conquer. Because I always tell people that true black power, because you studied the civil rights movement, when black folks are really unified in what is called black power, that's about unity and solidarity. But in white power, it's about divide and conquer. This system is white supremacy. So the best way to keep power is to keep people divided and conquered. People that should have their best interests. Like, for example, I'm not going to never forget about almost 10 years ago, I think, that I was at the Greyhound bus station in Memphis, and there was a black woman sitting next to me from Alabama, and she told me something that was very fascinating. She said, brother, when I was growing up in Alabama, my father had a very prosperous grocery store, and guess who were the biggest customers? I said, who? It was the white folks that supported my father's store. Now, this is Alabama, because there's a saying that people don't understand. In the South, as a black person, you get close, but don't get too big. But up north, you can get big, but just don't get too close. That's how it works. People think the South was so segregated, but places like St. Louis is more segregated to me than Mississippi. It still is. Yeah,
and there's a big problem with, as you know, there's the division between the city and the county. And so the city so the city can't rely on taxes from the county to improve the schools. And the city is overwhelmingly African American, and the county is, I think, about 23% African American or so. And so when you divide it, and then the county, of course, as we've been seeing, is divided up into these little municipalities, which are very divided by race. And so it's kind of like you've structured a system whereby you've created a lot of social and racial segregation just in the way the schools are set up, just in the way the districts run, just in the way the municipalities exist. And it is these little aristocratic fiefdoms, and it's a wealthy elite keeping, I think, low-income people at each other's throats. And I'm glad you made the point about Ferguson too with the policing. I mean, that really, if you look at, there was an NPR report that I'm sure you saw talking about how they harassed a big source of income for the local police, for the local community or the local government in Ferguson is getting these fines. It's a racially biased fine system. And that's a function of rich people and rich institutions not paying their taxes. And I came to see WashU as one of those that wasn't paying its taxes and ought to be.
I definitely agree with you because the sister Sharon talking about growing up in New York City, and there's a joke in New Yorkers. They always talk about Columbia University being the biggest slumlord in Harlem or whatever. And I think about WashU being the biggest slumlord in St. Louis, and I don't call it Missouri. I call it misery. I know people say Missouri and Missouri. I call it Missouri because that's for Dred Scotland or Dred Scotland in St. Louis or whatever. Because when the first thing I noticed when I come to St. Louis, I love St. Louis is one of my favorite places, regardless. But when you come into St. Louis, the first thing you notice about downtown is that nice looking courthouse as a reminder that you're still a slave. That you still don't have all the rights you should have as a citizen of this country. Because I went to Selma for the Selma 50. And I always go to talk to the poor and working class folks. Every time I go to a city, if I'm in the city, I go to Queensbridge or the largest project in America. I stayed over there to talk to the people over there. So when I went to Selma, one of the first places I went to was the projects to talk to the people about what's really going on. Because people don't realize with the Selma 50 in the city known as Selma, you got the nice old antebellum South Mansion style homes on Dallas Avenue. But you go a little bit further down, you can understand why the city has a 12% unemployment rate among African Americans, and their crime rate is like 4 to 5 times, or maybe 3 to 5 times the average of the state of Alabama. Because there's a lot of poverty. Because even we talk about Bloody Sunday, but guess what they did? When the black folks did get their voting rights respected, they kept the mayor of that town in office for 24 more years. They kept George Wallace in office for several more terms. So, to me, it's good to have rights, but if your mentality has not been detoxified and deprogrammed and rebooted, then what is the good is rights? And also, it was somebody from Twitter, my brother Taylor Made out in Howard. He goes to Howard in Washington, D.C., and I want to share what he said about Howard. He said, I am at Howard University, man, Ron. If you get in, there's no guarantee you'll graduate. That's Howard one-on-one right there. Because a lot of reasons why people can't graduate from Howard and places like that is because of lack of financial resources. Like I said, the Obama administration right now is not supporting the HBCUs, and we talked about Pell Grants. They are limiting their access to financing at the HBCUs. So you got all these issues of class. Man, class is very important, but also race. Without racism, capitalism as we know it could not exist. Without racism, America as we know it could not exist. Like I was talking to the youngest member of the Ferguson Commission. I met him, Brother Rasheen Aldridge in Jackson, Tennessee, about over a week ago. And he was trying to fight for the minimum wage fight for 15, the fight for 15. I said, brother, y'all supposed to be making $30 an hour minimum wage. Go look at some Noam Chomsky on YouTube for about 5 minutes. He'll break it down to you. He'll break down about 500 years of oppression basically in 5 minutes or less. Guaranteed. Fast food for thought. But Noam Chomsky said, based on the cost of living and the cost of inflation, that the minimum wage will be almost $30 an hour. So they got us fighting the blood sport. White supremacy is the blood sport, but they got you fighting in a, you read Invisible Man, what they call that, a Royal Rumble or a Battle Royale. But they got us knocking each other out, punk, drunk, silly like. And they said we could give them $30, but let them fight over something they already had in the first place, which was $15.
Yeah.
So we don't even know, like you said, what you doing, like you whistleblowing on public knowledge or should be better known. And you paying a price for that. Go ahead, Zombie.
Oh, yeah, I think and I think this is an important point to make when you're talking about the way, and I like the idea of white supremacy as a blood sport because, when I applied to college, every single one of my mother's relatives, that was the Southern wing, told me that I wouldn't get into college because I wasn't black. And that is exactly what the rich people would like every working class white person to think.
Exactly.
Because it's not the rich. It isn't the rich white kid that took your place. No. It wasn't the donor's kid. The people who were grossly overrepresented, they didn't take your place. It was a minority that took your place. And that's one of the things that I've always been trying to speak out against, because I always want to say that this is how they stay in charge. This is how the rich keep the working class fighting amongst itself, fighting amongst ourselves based on race. And a lot of the relatives that I had who were, on my mother's side in particular, who were George Wallace fans, they completely bought into that system, and everything that they didn't have, it was because a black person on welfare took it, as far as they were concerned. And you could never really get them to look at big business and the wealthy in general and rich white people and put the blame on them for the situation.
Well, I'm glad you brought up George Wallace, and people like George Wallace and Pepus out of the governor of Arkansas. These people were really more opportunists than they were like white supremacists. They really, because you look about George Wallace, he started as a moderate, but he could not win that white Southern vote, so he had to flip on the racism card or the racism switch or whatever. Because about George Wallace, I learned that one of his former in-laws was Johnny Ford, the former mayor of Tuskegee. He was married to George Wallace's niece. And people don't know that. A lot of people don't know that. But Thomas Jefferson had black relatives, so what did that mean? You know what I'm saying?
Well, the thing with Wallace too is that he started out as one of the first jobs. I think this came up in the biography of him that was written by Dan T. Carter, called "Politics of Rage." And if I'm remembering correctly, that's where I read this. But it is the case that Wallace, one of the first appointments he got from one of his political bosses, it was the governor named James Folsom, and Wallace worked for him a lot and campaigned for him. And he got a reward from him, which was he wanted to be on the board of Tuskegee. And this was back, I think, in the 50s. So he was already at that point looking forward to the day when there would be black voters in Alabama in large numbers.
Right.
And then, of course, when he sees how big the reaction integration is, he then switches and goes the other way.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's definitely true that a lot of the people we've seen as hardcore racists, they in some ways it's worse. It's worse than them being actual racists in terms of the way they think. It's people like George Wallace who didn't really who were not particularly extreme, racist hate mongers to begin with, but then kind of moved into the role for sheer opportunism.
It's definitely that. And also, I remember this. I got a couple of experiences I could share at WashU. They were very fascinating. It blew my mind. I remember I was a scholar in the arts banquet my freshman year, because I'm a John B. Irvin scholar, a proud alumnus of that program at WashU. The John B. Scholar program is a program named in honor of John B. Irvin, who was the first black dean at Washington University in St. Louis. I just let people know out there in the audience who this guy was and why it's so significant. At first, it was a race-based scholarship. And, you still had merit. You got to have a certain qualification. And then when the Supreme Court decision came around, I believe it was 2003, it opened up to be more inclusive of people outside of just being black or African-American or of African origin in that sense. So I remember I went to the Scholar in the Arts banquet my freshman year at WashU. And I'll never forget, I had this conversation with one of the big-time donors at the School of Art, and we was talking about baseball and everything. I mean, he probably was surprised that a black dude knew who Jimmy Foxx was or something, or something like that. So we were talking about old school baseball and stuff. And then he started talking about the Civil War. Now, I told the guy I was from Memphis, and the guy said, "You know who my favorite guy from the Civil War is? My favorite hero?" I said, "Who?" Nathan Bedford Forrest. And he said he was like one of the biggest geniuses. Like somebody said that two geniuses out of Civil War, I think it was General Sherman. He said two geniuses were produced by the Civil War. That's Abraham Lincoln and Nathan Bedford Forrest. And I'm saying, oh my God, I know who Nathan Bedford. I've been knowing who Nathan Bedford Forrest was since I was in 4th grade. I mean, he's buried on one of our busiest streets in Memphis, in Union Avenue, in what used to be known as Forest Park. So he was going on, and I said, yes, they still study his techniques in military schools throughout the world. And so I was thinking to myself, I told him all this. I told him that I'm aware of who he was, but I guess he'll let me know, hey, son, you don't really belong here. You're out of place. I'm just letting you know. I mean, I guess if I had said something, but then I had a lot of other experiences at WashU that was very fascinating. I remember I want to say it was my junior year. And it was spring. And he had a couple of parents come up for the weekend. And one of my friends, she was a white girl that was in the art school. She was from Michigan, came from a well-off family. And her folks came to visit her, so I ran into her at the Malincrot Student Center. And she went out of her way to introduce me to her parents. Her parents turned red and was nervous. They said, I said, I'm not screwing your daughter. And, no. They turned all red. We didn't think, so to be in WashU, you got to be really smart, huh? I said, I guess I'm kind of smart. I mean, I don't think they'll let anybody stupid in WashU. And then, like, the next day, right, I saw her at a dance. She said, Ron, I just want to say, I said, I know your parents are like that, and it's okay. Because you can't help who your parents are. I said, don't apologize for your parents. That's who they are. I mean, there was just snobs about it. Like what Thomas Jefferson relative said, we're just snobs, okay? They don't want to call it racist. They call it just being snobs.
Yeah. Yeah, it's frustrating, and I think, the point about Nathan Bedford Forrest, I think that's something that, that's something I noticed in sort of people who want to talk about the brilliant Confederate tactics in the Civil War. And, a lot of those people who really lionize these Confederate officers, they always, I'm just admiring their military prowess and their military genius. It's not really true. I mean, that guy definitely wanted you to know that he was admiring the KKK's founder.
The first Grand Wizard, right? The first Grand Wizard.
Yeah, I think that's what
But like folks that admire George Rommel, though. Oh, George Rommel was different. He was the Desert Fox. I mean, it might have been the case, but still, though. I mean, he was a Nazi.
Yeah.
Okay, I can respect that. I'm not saying we should, get rid of it, not acknowledge, but acknowledge all of it, except the whole truth. Let's don't talk about some of the truth. Talk about all of the truth and accept it. It's like with Margaret Sanger. People talking about they won't put Margaret Sanger on the $20 bill. She no better than Andrew Jackson to me. I mean, she was a racist and white supremacist. I mean, she had Klan meetings. She was at Klan meetings. She thought about black folks were inferior. That's why Planned Parenthood, a lot of this stuff was started for genocidal purposes. I mean, this is not nothing I'm making up. Let's do the research. I mean, Hitler learned how to do all that stuff from America, looking at American history. I mean, like I always tell people, America trains all its own terrorists. Who was they fighting in the Civil War? Graduates from West Point. Who planned Pearl Harbor? A Harvard graduate. Emeril Yamamoto was a Harvard graduate. He went to Harvard. He learned how to fly airplanes over here. Sounds familiar? You know what I'm saying? So America trained our own terrorists. I don't know what they're talking about. They Dr. Frankenstein. America is Dr. Frankenstein.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our biggest problems have been what they call blowback. It's the CIA term for people that we fund who wind up causing problems for us. But I think your points on eugenics. I mean, that reminds you of what I was writing about in that letter. Because this is the thing I didn't get. The letter already ran to about 1,700 words, I think, and I was really conscious of not wanting to have it be too long because I thought, well, I want to answer everything and I don't want to leave myself open on any points, but at the same time I want people to read it all the way through. So
I read it all the way through. I had no problem. I didn't know what 1,700 words. I mean, I can say you the Thomas Paine of your generation. I mean, you really waking up. Seriously.
Well, that's I'm very that's very kind. I'm very flattered to hear that, and I'm not sure Thomas Paine would be glad to hear it, but you're definitely making me blush on that. But one of the things that I wanted to mention, and then I didn't really put into the letter, was that when you have this class bias that takes place, it ties in with what you were saying about eugenics, because eugenics are back. I mean, they're back. They're big business. They're respectable media. There's a writer named Charles Murray who basically he rebooted eugenic racist theories in the 1990s with his book The Bell Curve, where he argued that he said we don't really. Well, why have welfare programs? I mean, the poor people are stupid, and particularly African Americans and Hispanics they're just naturally dumb, and you can't help them, and that's his argument. And more recently, he published a book as recently as 2012 in which he argued that working-class whites essentially are genetically inferior to rich whites. And one of his prime arguments is, guess what? Working-class whites don't go to college. They don't go to top colleges. That's, if they were smart, we'd see them at Harvard, wouldn't we? So actually, the kind of discrimination and bias that I'm talking about, and the kind of institutionalized, as I call it, institutionalized class bigotry at these elite private universities, it has a very severe social consequence because it it lends credence to these eugenic theories that the poor are dumb, and the working class whites are dumb, and that black people and Hispanic people are dumb relative to rich whites. And Charles Murray has made a career out of making these ridiculous arguments, and they're touted by people in the New York Times like David Brooks. And part of the argument they're making is part of what they're doing is they're taking discrimination against working class people at elite private colleges and using it to prove that working class people and minorities are stupid. And that's another severe consequence of this.
And that's why your voice is so important on what you're talking about. This needs to be heard and amplified. And I'm honored that I'm able to use my platform to help you get the word out. And also, I just want to talk about getting back to like the article that set off 1,000 alarms and replies and shares on Facebook and beyond. I just want to talk about the response you got from the university, because I think it's very important that people understand that the sacrifices that you made personally and professionally when you did this, like you told me about the response that the university gave you. I just want you to share that with our audience so we get the word out about how they treated this post you did.
Okay, yeah. Basically, I went in that morning and I said, okay, I've got to make sure that I have my ID card with me. I've got to have the university gives you a Metro Pass too that you can use with your ID. And I got my key with me, so I've got to have everything in case they want me to leave abruptly. And so I sent the open letter out, and I had already, I guess, posted it on my blog at that point. And so I kind of sat at the desk and was imagining what was going on in Brookings Hall. And I then got a call from my one of the supervisors, and she she felt, I mean, I think she felt bad for me going. I think to some extent, I want to be clear that I never had any problem with anybody I work with in special collections or the Film and Media Archive. I think the university is exercising good stewardship of those collections that are there. The professionals that I worked with do a good job caring for those materials. These are the materials from Black Site Incorporated's films and other documentary filmmaker companies. Eyes on the Prize, The Great Depression, some of those series that were made by Black Site. They're doing a good job. The professionals there are doing a good job. And I'm proud of the work that I've done in making those materials accessible and helping to preserve them. But anyway, so one of my supervisors called and said that she was going to come over and talk to me about this. And so I pretty much knew that she was going to ask me to give in all my paperwork and everything, so or hand over my key and everything. So I went around to say goodbye to everybody, and she came by, and everybody was very polite and very nice, and I don't have any complaints about the way anybody acted toward me. The kind of weird thing was I did get an answer from the chancellor of the open letter, and it was just a one-line or thereabouts statement saying, I acknowledge receipt of your letter of recommendation, or your letter of resignation, not recommendation. And that was it. And so I was out of there within about 2 hours. And again, everybody was polite, and they don't have any objections to the way anybody handled it. But it was kind of weird that I got that one very short response from the chancellor.
But you on his radar. Chancellor Wright is an interesting dude. I know I had some run-ins with him. I didn't ask for the run-ins, but I had some interesting, not bad run-ins with him. But the fact that he acknowledged that you on his radar, they watch you.
Well, I think it may have been a legal formality for him to acknowledge the receipt of the resignation so they could so they could ask me to leave. I don't think it was wrong. I mean, I wanted to play this either way. I gave them 2 weeks' notice, so I would have been happy to continue doing my job as I've always done it for 2 more weeks. But I can see their point, which is that if anybody calls, I'm the guy who answers the phone, or I was.
Right.
So I can see why maybe if somebody called about this and they wouldn't necessarily want me answering the phone before handing over to public affairs, I can see why they would regard that as awkward. So, I think they handle it all right. But I mean, what's been interesting to me is that I've been hearing from people affiliated with WashU who don't want to go public about this, including some faculty members, and these are people that I had little to no dealings with while I was there. But I mean, I've been hearing from a lot of people with the connections to WashU saying this needed to be said, and that they agree with what I'm saying. And so, I guess the way I look at it is that this is something I'm doing to try to get this issue of legacy preferences and other class biases to be the kind of debate that we have in other areas. we've had a lot of debates about, gender bias in colleges and about race bias in colleges. We need to have this debate too, and
right.
We need to be willing to call names. We need to be willing to say there's institutionalized bigotry, because if WashU had done this, had acted in the way they've acted toward working class people, if they'd acted that way toward racial minorities or toward women, there would rightly have been much more reaction about it. And we need to recognize that this is a third aspect of that policy. We need to be of our vigilance. The public needs to be vigilant about bias based on class, just as we should be, and we aren't always as vigilant as we should be, but we should be on race and gender as well.
I know that. I'm glad you brought up the class. I'm glad you stayed on that class issue piece, because I know WashU, believe it or not, they have a very activist-minded student population. I'm just thinking about the last 10 years of the sit-ins and protests that you bore witness to, Brother Chris. Can you talk about that? The class things that are going on WashU with the students.
Well, there was a sit-in back in 2005 about the way that workers were treated, particularly janitorial staff and the custodial staff and the staff that worked in the cafeteria. And there was a lot of there was a sit-in in the administration building about that, and we had a bunch of rallies, and I wasn't part of the committee that organized that, but I attended a bunch of the rallies and contacted a bunch of people I knew who were affiliated with WashU, and we all started writing the chancellor about this, saying that he should agree with the terms, and he should improve conditions for the janitorial and the kitchen staff who were working there. Because it really was a bad situation, and they did give in and give some raises and improve things somewhat. I think they need to go further on that point. But I think that's there are people, and I do hear from people at WashU who were involved in that, and people who've been involved in trying to reach out to the community, and who see that WashU can be a resource or has the capacity to be a resource for people in St. Louis. And that's really been the one thing that's united all of the emails I've gotten from people who are either in WashU right now or have some affiliation to it or are graduates. There's this tremendous frustration that this institution has these kind of resources, a $5.3 billion endowment that they don't pay taxes on.
Wow.
And was built up in part because they don't have to pay taxes. And they have these resources, and that there are people on campus who want to do things to make WashU a positive for healing the problems that are so bad in St. Louis on racial division and class division. And a lot of these people felt really thwarted during their time at WashU, and they feel that WashU is not pushing for the things that they could do to make this work. And that's what's really frustrating to me.
I definitely feel you out there, man. Like I just saw it for myself. If people ever visit WashU, if you are in St. Louis, do it your duty to go visit WashU. I mean, they are living a lap of luxury. I mean, Jesus, like the emperor has no clothes, but he has a jacuzzi. The emperor has no clothes, but he has a jacuzzi. I mean, they eating lobster and wine. I mean, these are the students. If they had that when I was a student back then, I would never graduate. I'd still be in WashU right now as a really a senior citizen. Not just a senior, but a senior citizen, man. They got it good at WashU. But the problem is, I'm glad that some of the students are not buying into the illusion of inclusion, and that they are really saying their mind and getting out there and letting folks know that everything ain't fair and everything ain't gold that glitters at WashU. I'm glad that people getting out there like yourself that are willing to sacrifice their careers and your benefits and all that stuff. And people don't realize, like we talked about it off the air, that people look at World War II, they said because of World War II, they got the GI Bill. No, the GI Bill was gotten through the bonus army. These were the World War I veterans who were not given the benefits that were promised by the American government after serving in World War I, and many of them were massacred in their 10th city in Washington, D.C. One of the reasons they say that Herbert Hoover lost the election and Franklin Roosevelt was given the office, or was voted in, rather. But also you look at the 1930s, it was a time of great extremes, like the Great Depression. That was really a time we had the working class and even people of color trying to come together, and we was close to a revolution. Now, it's a thing they don't tell us in our history books, but I remember like the guy who said, war is a racket, war is hell, General Smedley Butler, who was the most decorated Marine in U.S. history. He won 2 Congressional Medal of Honor. Like, normally when you win a Congressional Medal of Honor, a lot of times you're dead. But he won 2 of them. I think one for the Spanish-American War and one for the Boxer Rebellion in China. And he figured something out that a lot of folks would never figure out. He said that war is a racket to control other people's resources. He figured out that, he was no better than Al Capone. Not only was he no better than Al Capone, but he was also bigger than Al Capone. Whereas Al Capone was just a racketeer in one city, he actually was going from continents and different countries, creating banana republics for the corporate interests of America. Not for the people, but the corporate interests. And the reason why I bring up General Smedley Butler, you can read a lot of his works online, they are in the public domain, is the fact that he alleged back in the 1930s that he was approached by certain powerful figures on Wall Street to overthrow the government. Their plan was to overthrow the American government, to assassinate or rid us of Franklin Roosevelt, and to install him as president of the United States. And he allegedly testified before Congress behind closed-door session. He also went to the press. But a lot of folks dismiss what he said, and I believe he died in 1940. But think about the fact that Franklin Roosevelt was almost assassinated in Miami back in 1933 by a guy named Giuseppe Zangara, who claimed, I believe, to be a socialist, if I'm not mistaken, or an anarchist or something like that. But he was almost assassinated in Miami back in 1933, and the person who ended up getting killed was the mayor of Chicago, Anton Cermak, who was next to FDR in the car, I believe. But that's something that people can look up. That's why I want to keep people's mindset going, because this class issue is not going away, because you cannot justify people working at Walmart full-time 40 hours a week and still need EBT cards.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and it's basically the taxpayers subsidizing Walmart. And this is, and there's what I want to emphasize too, and particularly when I'm talking about legacy admissions, is that the taxpayers are subsidizing that. This idea that it's none of your business because WashU is private. These elite private universities are taking massive tax exemptions. And here's an example to see how it would work. Just a hypothetical. We have student A and student B. Student A, she's the first in her family to apply to college. Her family is working class. She applies to an elite private college. She doesn't get in. Student B, her family is rich. Their legacies at this particular college. And her record isn't as good academically as student A, but she gets in because of the legacy connection. Now, you look at the tax. How is the taxpayer involved in this? Well, student B's parents gave donations to the college. They took a tax deduction on those because they were donating to a nonprofit. So they bribed this school to admit their less qualified child to this college. And they took a tax deduction on the bribe. The college doesn't pay tax when they receive the donation because they're a nonprofit. They then invest it on Wall Street. They make money off it. They don't pay tax on the investment income. They then take it and buy stuff with it, and they don't pay sales tax. So who paid for student B to get in to ahead of student A? The working class student. Who paid for that? The taxpayer did. Student A's family paid for that.
Wow.
Because they're paying their taxes like everybody else.
That's incredible. When you say that, I think, what the hell is a private nonprofit? Your corporation. It's like, the NFL is a nonprofit. People don't realize the NFL is a nonprofit. How can you gross up multi-billion-dollar receipts every year and be a nonprofit, and you have the taxpayers paying for your stadiums? And you're a multi-billion-dollar business.
I don't think I've seen Jerry Jones out there begging for change lately.
Right, but the taxpayers pay for that new stadium, though. That's the thing. He's a billionaire. This system, the game is rigged, man. It wasn't just fixed last night. It's fixed all the time. The game is fixed 24/7. So I want to go to the caller lines. A lot of people lighting up. Okay, this is great.
Okay.
We're going to go out to the great Midwest, back in KC, in Missouri. KC, Missouri. How you doing? This is Renee.
Hey, Ron. How are you?
I'm good. Happy Resurrection Day. You doing all right?
I'm doing well. Great show as always. I love you. You have such a wealth of information. Like, it's beyond. So I always enjoy listening to you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to kind of say something. I was listening earlier to the lady who called about her daughter and with the universities and different issues like that. And, not to be, any kind of way, but just to be really honest about it. What struck me was, we're talking about class and race, I believe. But when she spoke about, calling the school or what have you, and one of the things she said was, my daughter has blonde hair, blue eyes. And as she made sure to make that note as she went on to describe all these other things, and that struck me as white privilege. It struck me as, how dare she have to go through any issues when this is a blonde-haired, blue-eyed young woman? How dare she be turned down from this university? How dare she have these adversities? And maybe perhaps that wasn't, the truth about how she was feeling, but her including that piece of information was really, really important to me. And it's interesting because when you have Caucasians or what have you that are, maybe lower income or whatever the case is, and then they go through some adversities into getting to certain areas or things that they want to do. And then they want to align with black people on a certain level to say, oh, well, I'm underprivileged or I don't have enough money. I always find that interesting, that when you are in the low-income areas, primarily black areas, and you have white people who are on a low socioeconomic level, they are so quickly to want to try on a certain level, let's be clear, just on a certain level, align themselves with black people. And I just find it so very, very interesting. But in my opinion, excuse me, I was eating something, but in my opinion,
go ahead.
Class, race outdoes class. Because for me, if you are still an underprivileged white person, you are still going to have a much more wealth of opportunity than you do as a black person. My mother used to say, and it was so funny because we will be driving, and maybe you see you can tell kind of underprivileged white person or whatever the case is. And she would say, that's a waste of white skin. Because this is what my mom would say. She's like, that's a waste of white skin. Because you're going to automatically, again, we live in a white supremacist infrastructure. Okay? Automatically, when you are dealing with white supremacy, there's a level of privilege just for having white skin. I'm not saying that white people cannot suffer and they cannot struggle, but I'm saying don't always try to align your quote-unquote struggle with ours because you feel for whatever reason your blonde-haired, blue-eyed daughter, she wasn't automatically just accepted on the basis of that alone. So I just wanted to throw that out there to you.
I appreciate Sister Renee, but hold on. I think I got the Sister Sharon calling in. I think she want to talk to you about or address the issue. Sister Sharon,
hi.
Are you there?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead. You've been listening to us talking about you for like 40 minutes, I think. So
I know. I got to say a couple of things. Number one, I think you cleared this up for me, and I appreciate it. I never said that N-word ever. I would never say it.
Yeah. I'm sorry I misheard that,
yeah. Number two, is it Rachel? Is that her name?
Renee.
No, Renee.
Yeah.
Renee, honey, I was saying I never told the school my daughter had blonde hair and blue eyes. What the point I was trying to make was that, and just like with Howard University, it was not a matter of race. It was a matter of money. That WashU was, when I was talking about poverty should be a protected class. And I was, so what I'm hearing from you is prejudice against white people.
No.
Okay?
No,
and I was taking the color out of it. I was trying, and I never said that to the university.
Color?
What, honey?
But you injected color.
Because they were talking about racism. They were talking about color. And I was saying it wasn't a matter of color with WashU. It was a matter of class. It was a matter of power and money. That's what I was trying to say. And I never, I never think because I'm white. I hate being white. All right, and you can think all you want about. I am embarrassed. Okay, I was right there fighting with civil rights. I always wanted the Indians to win. I am not a bigot. In fact, except that I hate bigots. So I guess I am a bigot. But I'm a bigot against bigots. So there you go. But I think you misunderstood me. I was trying to point out that I don't think it was as much race as it was power and privilege.
Okay. Well, for me, when listening to you speak and when you injected, you said you were trying to take race out of it, but you injected the fact your daughter is blonde hair and blue eyes. And that struck me as being white privilege. Excuse me.
I'm sorry. That's not what I meant.
Okay. Well, it struck me as saying white privilege. How can this blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl be turned down? How can you turn her down? You know what I mean? And maybe we're not saying that, but that's how it came across to me.
I was saying that to the show host and the guest. That's who I was saying it to. I didn't say it to the school. I didn't think of that. And I did kind of think that way, that it might have been race when she applied at Howard. But then as they were talking and I was thinking about it, I realized, it wasn't race, it was money. It was the fact that she needed to get a deferment on the application.
And can I say something? Go ahead, I'm sorry. I wanted to say something about the HBCU situation.
Yes.
First of all, Howard, one of my cousins, she just graduated there, about 2 years ago. And I know that it's extremely expensive to attend there. But personally, I attended Langston University, which is also an HBCU. One of my actually a couple of my very close, in their apartment complex on the university, they had white roommates. They were there on full scholarships because they are considered minorities at HBCUs. So there are many scholarship programs for white students or non-black students at historically black colleges and universities. But furthermore, I understand where you're coming from, and maybe you didn't mean it this way or that way. But for me, and I'm not just to be honest with you, I'm not an integrationist. So for me, I don't look to try to be appeasing to, so to speak, white people. And I'm sorry, I just have to put it that way, because in the whole scheme of things, in the struggles that we have as the black community, and I'm not taking anything away from your experience, but we have so many tragic experiences when it comes to trying to get into university, when it comes to and even with our black institutions, we must allow white students to go there, and many times on full scholarships. So I just wanted to throw that out there, and,
I appreciate that. And I do look white, okay? I am Indian a little bit, and I'm proud of that, but I could never understand what you've gone through because I am white, all right? But just like I could never understand what it was like to be very poor until I was poor, so sometimes, all I can do is stand alongside and fight for what I think is right or wrong. And I think there's a terrible, terrible discrimination in our country. I think these guys are right on about the elite class, in the United States. I mean, my God, my daughter also went and protested the School of Americas. That's where they train all the terrorists.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
America.
Can I say one last thing?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm done, honey. Thank you.
I just want to say one last thing to you and to, white people, and this is just from me personally.
Go ahead.
But you all don't have to apologize for being white or feel a sense of guilt. No. My thing is for whites who have an awareness, who have a cultural awareness about the black struggle and the things that we go through. And like you said, you can never understand it on the level. However, you can, in some way, you can see it, okay? You can see it, you're aware of it, okay?
Right.
My thing to white people would be to speak to your fellow white people and try to make them more culturally aware, to do things on the level that you are on. You don't necessarily have to feel a sense of guilt or a sense of shame or anything about who you are. You didn't have a choice in what color you are. You have a choice, though, in your awareness. You have a choice, though, in your ability to speak to other people of your own race. So that's all I want to throw out there.
Right, and I have to just say that I have done that, and I've lost jobs, and I've been, labeled and things like that. So I can understand, But, at the end of the day, I answer to God. I don't answer.
And I can respect that.
People, So if I have to lose a job for something that's right, then that's what I got to do.
All right, I want to thank y'all for that as well. Y'all are welcome to stay on to the line. I just want to get one more person's voice added to the chorus. Sister Barnett, you there with 914?
I sure am, Mr. Hurd. How are you this evening?
Oh, I'm good. I'm happy Resurrection Day. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
And happy Resurrection Day to you. And I didn't catch all of your show. I just caught the last 20 minutes of your show, and I find this very interesting.
Yes,
Let me just get this one out the way, and then we can talk about classism, because that's a major issue in the United States, not just on a university level.
Absolutely.
Now I'm 60 years old, okay, and I was born in segregation, and I went through desegregation, and I'm back in segregation again. So my only thing about racism and people talking about bigotry, especially when it's a white perspective, is that my name is not Honey. I don't allow any white people to call me out of my name unless it's ma'am. Because I remember in the first segregation that I went through, that when a white person called you out of your name and it was a familiar name, it was that there was a friendly nature involved, and there was nothing friendly in the 50s. There was nothing friendly in segregation. So, I just want to put that out there and say that if you on our side, that the first thing you can do is to eliminate that from your vocabulary when you're talking to any black person until you get to know them, and then that's a good thing to do.
Okay.
It's considered a racial slur.
Wow.
So let's talk about classism. First of all, Mr. Hurd, my father is from Kansas City, Missouri. Okay.
Right.
And so, he's pretty familiar with St. Louis and Chicago and all those different kinds of things. And I remember when he was alive, and he used to tell me the stories. And one of the things that my father did, and I don't know if I've discussed this with you, but during desegregation, my father championed black economics in the country. And one of the things that he was key on was if you can't get to the education, then the best way to liberate yourself was economically. And so he made sure that he created a system where plenty of blacks who could not attend higher education because they had no high school diploma, no, at that time, GED. GED was just coming out then. And, they were convicted felons for whatever reason, because, if you black, probably 7 times out of 10, a black man these days is going to be a convicted felon, and that means he walked across the street against the green light. So he created a system where these people could become millionaires. Now, having said that, some of them sent their children to Washington University. But those times have changed. So I'm noticing that Washington University, they have the distinction of being the nation's least economically diverse top college. And I find that appalling, especially based upon their location.
Right.
Because how many states do they get? They get Kentucky, they get Tennessee, they get some of Illinois, of course they get Missouri,
Arkansas,
and Arkansas.
So
you mean to tell me that this major university in this region can't recruit poor people, poor black people, poor any kind of people other than white? I find that hard to believe. I think what they did was lock them out, and I think they did it on purpose. And I think they did it because the people who donate to that university wanted it that way, because the rule of thumb is follow the money. And I heard another gentleman, I don't know who his name is, but he was talking about it being a private nonprofit, which that's illegal. You can do that in this country, okay? That's perfectly legal. You just got to know how to fix your paperwork. And black folks we got to understand their paperwork. If we understand their paperwork, then we could have something going on too. But their paperwork is set in such a way that they don't expend any money. They just take it in. That's what they do.
Yeah.
And they take it in from all areas and all walks of life, not just taxpayers and poor people. They take it in from everywhere. They take it in from their rich donors as well. And everybody at the top gets paid back. Everybody at the bottom does not. And that's the way the system works. And it's perfectly legal in this country. Is it right? No. But it is legal. Now, I understand that Washington University is they have a new program. They instituted some kind of program this year where they're going to go out here and try to get the kids to come to the university and all those kinds of things. But now Washington University, I believe, is going to run into a problem. And let me tell you what I believe the problem is going to be. The problem is going to be that because they have isolated themselves for so many years, college, higher education now is big business. It's business. Their colleges and universities now are not so much interested in educating people as they are in making money. And so now it's highly competitive. That's what happened down there with those kids down at Oklahoma University. That's where my civil rights started, was in Oklahoma back in the 50s in the sit-in movement. So I'm quite familiar with Oklahoma City. It's not that they cared so much about what those kids were singing on the bus in the privacy of their own bus. It's the fact that these football players said, well, I'm not going to your university then. I'll go someplace else.
Right.
And the kids said, I'm not coming to your university because this is what you do and this is what you have. And see, these kids are different. The white ones are different. The black ones are different. All of them are different now. These kids are talking about they don't see color. And they don't even want to have a conversation about that. Okay? Not these kids going to college now. Everything is acceptable to them, whereas in my day it was not. And so they're going to find that if you continue to isolate yourself, you're going to isolate yourself right out of some money, and you're going to need that private donation money that you're getting, because that's going to be your bread and butter. And people are going to get tired of going in their pockets and giving you money and these kids are not coming out ready for the world because the world has changed. America has changed.
Well, Sister Barnett,
very multicultural.
Yeah.
You know, now it's about being multicultural. Black people have been X'd out of everything, and even in affirmative action, you know, which they're getting rid of in many states. But you know, what is it? It's not black people now. It's all races. It's homosexuals. You know, of course, it's white women. So, you know, black folk, we just always push. We're so marginalized. And as the sister just said, these younger people now, and I know the University of Oklahoma very well, but these younger people now, they don't have a cultural awareness. They are just there, and they want to blend with everybody. And, you know, I think it's just very dangerous. I'm just very fearful for my nieces and nephews and my future children. I'm just fearful in a lot of ways of what, you know, is down the road for us, because we're just mixing and blending with everybody, and we don't have any real care or concern about our blackness. And I mean, there's an element, of course, that does, but there's a lot of young people who don't really care. So,
I would say Sister Barnett is very humble. Her father was the late great Samuel J. Cornelius, who was a well-known Washington D.C. respected political power broker. So I mean, a lot of great leaders, black and white, looked at him for guidance. I mean, he was appointed by the Nixon administration in a high government position. It relates to economics.
He was also
very humble. Go ahead.
He was also appointed in the Bush administration, and he was appointed in the Reagan administration.
There you go.
He is the father of black economics in this country. He coined the term black capitalism. As a matter of fact, when you talked about affirmative action, that started out as the Philadelphia Plan, and Arthur Fletcher is responsible for that. And he was an uncle to me because he was my father's best friend. So he's considered the father of affirmative action. He's been deceased some years now.
And that's
how I grew up. I grew up with Richard Pryor in the house, grew up with seeing Harry Belafonte and Martin Luther King and Claire Looper and Medgar and his wife and all those people. They were. I remember when I was reading Mr. Hurd about. I was listening to your YouTube about Martin Luther King, and I remember after he was assassinated and the riots had quelled down. And Ed, this is a story that's going to be in the book. And everybody, all the black leaders met in Atlanta. And so they were talking about, well, what were they going to do? You know, because they was going to have a real revolution. So the black guys said, and my father just got so tickled with this story. He said, and they said, well, we want 5 states. We want 5 states. That's what we want. And my father was sitting in the back of the room with Louis Armstrong, and Louis Armstrong looked at him and said, who gonna run the waterworks? Nobody knew nothing about running no water back then, you know. Louis Armstrong.
Well,
is there a way, sister, to contact you, or are you on Facebook, or?
I'm not on Facebook, but you can get my information from Mr. Hurd. Mr. Hurd has my information.
I'll do that.
But yeah, Mr. Hurd, you know, I just appreciate you, and we got to figure out how we gonna get you on a one of those Joe Madison levels. We got to.
Oh, the Black Eagle. No, you know the Black Eagle went to Washington University, right? You know he went to Washington University, right? Joe Madison. Yeah.
Yeah, Joe Madison. He's part of my father's clique. I call them the clique. You know, all of them. I'm trying to get you because we need some new people up there. We need some younger voices. You know, the old folks. I've been trying to tell some of these old folks, y'all got to go sit down. These kids know what they doing now. They know what they doing.
Thank you, Miss Barnett. I appreciate it.
Am I still? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I just have to say, I got goosebumps everywhere when you were talking about who your father was. I mean, just chills everywhere. And I just want to say I'm really honored, to be educated by you. And
Absolutely.
I'm very grateful to be able to have met you today.
Well, I appreciate that. My father passed away in August. And one of the things and I cared for him for the last 13 years of his life because he was ill and nobody knew he was ill. Because he worked a week up until a week before his death. He was also the chairman of United Black Fund, which is a major organization, nonprofit organization in Washington, D.C., but they also have 22 annexes in the United States, and they also have 2 overseas. One of them is in Israel, where you remember when Whitney Houston went over there and got baptized.
Yes.
Okay.
That's part of the United Black Fund. That's United Black Fund. Yeah,
wow.
That's United Black Fund. And so he was responsible for all of that as well. But that was part of his volunteer work. Now he didn't get a check for that. He did that out of the goodness of his heart because he was a person who understood that we have got to keep it moving forward.
Right.
It doesn't matter what Washington University does or does not do. We have an obligation to keep us moving forward and keep our children moving forward and teach them so they understand that we ain't made it yet. It's going to be a while. It's going to be a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we want to rush it, but it's going to be a minute. We're going to tweak it. We can't change it, but we sure going to put some tweaks in it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, our brother Chris Pepus, he been solid. I know he's been you the reason why we talking at all, brother Chris. So it's all you set the table. You set the table for us to talk, have this food for thought dinner. I just want to give you some time. I don't want to be. I know we ran over time a little bit, so I just want to give you some time to offer your thoughts and stuff. And
I mean, I've been listening to all the discussion. I think one thing I would emphasize is I think if you look at working class white people, if you look at working class black people, working class Hispanics, whether they're gay or straight, I think we're going to find that we're facing many of the same economic problems now. When a factory is moved from, you look at a place like St. Louis where we used to have industry. And big business decided to move the factories to places like Bangladesh where they're working sweatshops with little children working in them. Working class black people lost their jobs there, and they wound up, broke because of it. That happened to working class whites too. The discrimination has certainly been more severe based on race. But I think if you made a list of the things that we need to solve in this country, for working class people of all racial backgrounds, we'd find that we'd agree on most of them. We could have single payer health care if we could build a coalition that includes working class people of all racial backgrounds. We could stop these policies of the big business companies hiding their profits. There was a study not too long ago that said that there's about $21 trillion being hidden illegally in tax shelters by big business. That's the equivalent of the U.S. economy and the Japanese economy combined, or the gross national product. And so I think one of the things I want to emphasize, whether you're talking about education or whether you're talking about the workplace, we need to try to create a coalition that's going to include all the different racial groups within the working class and make a better deal for everybody. And I think that the things we're going to want to see, like single-payer health care, free access to education, end to these student loan crippling debts, these are things we can push for if we're willing to take these stands with regard to social class in general about places like WashU. And WashU really is a drain on the situation in St. Louis. They're not paying taxes, and that's one of the reasons why we have this racially discriminatory tax system fine system that we see in Ferguson. And I think that's the inevitable result of pulling money out of rich people not paying their share anymore. And what happens is the poor people then get squeezed. And this racially discriminatory policing going on in Ferguson is one manifestation of squeezing the poor to make up for money that was taken out of the system by the rich with their big tax cuts. So I think we need to emphasize things that are common here. And the way I look at it is, I remember what Dr. C.T. Vivian told me when I interviewed him, and he said, you look at the way the big business is acting now, it's like the old plantation system. They've taken that and they've created a system where they get all the tax breaks, the corporate welfare, and everybody else has to pay to them. And I think we need to get back to the sorts of things he was talking about in Dr. King's campaign for the Poor People's Campaign, to unite everybody. And that'll help us to fight racism. That'll help us to shore up affirmative action that's under attack in so many states. And I think these talking about these class issues and bringing them to the center too, that helps us talk about racial and gender prejudice as well. And I think I'm encouraged by seeing people talking, from different groups talking about these things, because I think people are moving toward agreement just in the conversation we've had today. Don't you get that sense, everybody?
I definitely do. I mean, yeah. It all comes down to money. I mean, yeah. But you know, the thing about it is, well, black people, though, I think it's very interesting. I mean, I know we know we're talking about Missouri or Misery, and I'm thinking about Negro League Baseball, like the big Trojan horse, like what Jackie Robinson was. He was the economic Trojan horse because, well, people don't realize the Negro Leagues were making way more money and was more popular than the white people league, the major league. And so what they did was Jackie Robinson played for the only Negro League baseball team that was outright owned by a white man named A.L.L. who started nighttime baseball. He the one came up with the lights to use at nighttime for baseball. And he was also friends with Branch Rickey, who was the general manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers. So they got Jackie Robinson to sign with the major leagues, and that caused the exodus of the major league stars, Negro League stars to the major leagues. And this is the problem. In the major leagues, the white baseball teams, if they lost a player to another white-owned baseball team, they had to be compensated financially. That was the rules. But when the Negro League baseball players started leaving the Negro Leagues, they were never compensated by the major leagues, and they were lost. It's like every time black folks try to do for self, we always get defeated by white supremacy. It's always the Black Wall Street. There's always a Wilmington, North Carolina, 1898. There's always a Rosewood, 1923, or Chicago, 1919. There's always all these stories of how this system does whatever it can to undermine black progress when it comes to do for self. Now people are realizing 100 years later, because today is the birthday of Booker T. Washington, that he was probably murdered by people that did not want to see black folks organized. Because what people don't understand about Booker T. Washington, that he is the mentor of Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey came to America to get with Booker T. Washington. And Booker T. Washington passed away, so he stayed in America to start the United Negro Improvement Association. And he was the greatest black mass leader of the 20th century. He had millions of black folks around the world listening to him. He didn't have no Twitter or no Instagram or no internet. He wasn't on the radio all day. He had millions of black folks. He was talking about do for self. He was talking about black economics. The last speech Dr. King did was not about no mountaintop. It was about black self-help and black economics, group economics. Even the speech he did in 1963 was about black reparations. He said it was an insufficient check. It bounced. We want our reparations. It wasn't about no dreaming, being white folks and all that. It was about give me my reparations. Give me what is due to me. Because white folks always had their white privilege and their affirmative action. This country could not exist without slavery, period. So, yes, it's about class, but capitalism in its present form cannot exist without racism, with a permanent discriminated class of people based on their color. Because we talk about discrimination at HBCUs is based on colorism. Or in the black community, we talk about colorism, how one discriminate against another based on the appearance of their skin. Who taught you to hate yourself? That's what Malcolm said. Who taught you to hate you? So we learned this from white supremacy, and this is the system that no black person can get justice under because we're not American citizens as we should be. We're Dred Scotts, okay? Because anytime you got to vote every so often to renew my voting rights like you renewing my driving license, that's a privilege. I mean, I don't got it. I'm not a citizen, okay? That's why I went down to Selma. I said, we got to renew this like I'm renewing my driver's license? You know, so that means I'm not a citizen because there's such thing as second-class citizenship. But I'm going to have you back on, Brother Chris Pepus. I don't want to keep nobody know it's Resurrection Day, but he has arisen. But also I want to add this too, because we don't know our history. Adam Clayton Powell Jr., he was the underwriter for the Great Society program. He was the one that gave the seed money for the National Endowment of the Arts. He's the one that helped co-architect Affirmative Action, which benefited white women more than any other group. And he also died April 4th, but 1972, 4 years after Dr. King. So that's a we need to study.
Right.
He's the greatest black politician we ever produced, and he also had a black agenda.
Right.
He chose to be black because he could pass for white, but he chose to be a black man, and he chose to have a black agenda. And I hate to say it, I think President Obama may be the only president in history that never really had a black agenda.
No, he's the only. It ain't no mistake that he's the only president.
I ain't saying it got to be for black folks, right? It could be he don't want to deal with black, period, and that's the problem. And that's another show. I'm sorry.
But you have to also understand that he can't relate to the black experience because he don't know nothing about it.
That's true too, and that's another show.
He really don't know nothing about that black experience. He wasn't born and raised over here with us. He wasn't in the movement.
President Obama is biracial or mixed. He is not a black man. He was packaged to the black community as being a black man. And as I say, a white woman cannot have a black child. And we as black people, of course, because we know from slavery, the one-drop rule and all this kind of thing, and because we've never really seen ourselves in any kind of form reflected when it comes to the president, but he was packaged to black people as being black, and this man is not black. And it's
the other thing you have to understand is politics. He came out of Chicago, okay, and Chicago runs the Midwest. Let's be clear. Everything that's going on in Ferguson started in Chicago. Anything happening in St. Louis started in Chicago. Okay? So if you want to break the Midwest, you break Chicago. That's what you do. That's what you do. And he came out of that system. And I know how he got out of there. And I know who got him out of there. Okay? Nobody gets in that Oval Office unless they have a stamp of approval from wherever they come from. He came from the Daily Machine.
Right.
He came from the Daily. Daily sent him up there.
And what many people do not know is, or don't realize or didn't really look into, is that President Obama actually only won by one small state over McCain. It was the Electoral College, that put him over the top. So again, he was selected and he was not elected. This is why there's such a huge number of primarily white people in this country with such strong vitriol toward this man. They did not vote for him. This assumption that so many white people voted for Obama is not really real. When you really look at the facts and not listen to the propaganda and the way that the news networks, which are owned only by 6 corporations, all of these news outlets, the way that they swayed it to make it appear. So if you go back and look at the facts of the situation, he won by one small state. Out of 50 states, he won by one small state over McCain. It was the Electoral College. Why do we have the Electoral College? Why is it not just a popular vote by what the people say? Again, selected and not elected.
And, Kennedy won because of Chicago. So it is the Midwest. President Kennedy won over Nixon because of Chicago by a very, very small margin. So I want to give it to Brother Chris Pepus. I'm sorry for overrunning, but brother, see how we do this show? It goes all over the place, man. I don't believe in censorship, Brother Chris. I'm sorry. I don't believe in censorship of any type. If David Duke was on the show, he can have his say. Go ahead.
No, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think the president did win the popular vote and the electoral vote the last 2 times, but if you look at the voting, he did very poorly among white voters, unfortunately. In the last election, and I think that's a product of. If you look at, we're talking about the big corporations, and Fox News Corporation has really tried to make him and African Americans in general into the sort of monster that working class whites need to be scared of, and so that they continue to support people like the Koch brothers and the other big corporations, and that's one of the things that I really always try to fight against. I'm trying to create an idea that we need to understand. We need to have different groups that are on the outside understand each other, and I'm encouraged by people having conversations like this, because I think we're finding more in common in many ways than I know a lot of people might have wanted us to see. Particularly the rich would want us to see.
Yeah,
definitely. I want to swing down to Houston right quick. I got another caller, then we'll wrap it up. I mean, it's a great conversation. Go on forever. But 713, you're on the air. Queen Ashira, I believe. Is this Queen? Hello? Ashira, are you there? I guess she's just listening, but she got a thing. So, okay. So, I just want to get last words from everybody. Then, you want to any last thoughts or last words you want to share with us? And I want to thank everybody for staying on the line and for this great conversation. It will definitely be in the archives, and I'll make it available also on YouTube as well, because it's information to get out there. So, anybody before I get Brother Chris to say the last word, want to say anything? I guess everybody cool. Well, Brother Chris, you want to wrap it up and tell us how we can support you and find out more?
Yeah, you can go to my blog. It's called Against Class Bigotry. It's againstclassbigotry.wordpress.com. There's a donate button that I'd appreciate it if people would use it, because I'm unemployed now, thanks to this action, but that I felt I had to take. And I would also point out that to people who are looking for discussions of race, is I do a lot of coverage with regard to race, and Ron can tell you that I did a piece not so long ago about the FBI report into the Emmett Till case, which I was stunned in 2007. Well, I guess I wasn't shocked, but I was very angry in 2007 when they did not indict Carolyn Bryant in Mississippi for manslaughter in the case of Emmett Till, despite everything the FBI had managed to find. And so you can find that on my blog as well. I reposted that recently. And I also posted an article not too long ago talking about how there's racism, how Fox News and other right-wingers have tried to frame racial minorities for the financial crash. And have tried to make it look as if, it's a ludicrous argument, but they've really pushed it very far, and they've gotten a lot of people to go along with them. They don't want people to think the white bankers caused the crash. They wanted people to think that it was minorities and policies with regard to welfare and civil rights that caused the crash. It's a ridiculous argument, but it has gone a long way, and I think it explains a lot about the upsurge in paramilitary activity we've seen, and also racism in general. So to me, these issues are all tied together, and I hope people will come and visit my blog and see what I'm writing about, and give me some comments on it, and send me some emails about it.
Well, I'll definitely be pushing your blog and push people to donate, and I just want to thank you, because you are definitely a great researcher and an academic, and just a generous person, a human being, because you definitely helped me out when I went to the archives to check out Henry Hampton, the Black Side stuff with Henry Hampton, who was also an alumnus of Washington University, class of 1960. He was the brother who created the Eyes on the Prize documentary that tells us about the history of the Civil Rights Movement in 13 episodes. Very powerful. And his collection is housed at WashU, and I spent several days in the archives, and Brother Chris was definitely a great help to me in terms of finding information and feel it at home and at ease in utilizing the archives. So I want to let people know that this guy is truly a class act. He's the utmost professional and just a decent person. And you should read what he has to say, because a lot of what he says, I lived through it at WashU. I got a lot of horror stories. I'm going to leave for my book. I don't want to tell everybody everything. But there's some great things about Washington University as well, too. I remember one of my mentors, the late, great Dean McLeod, who was the vice chancellor of student affairs. He wore many hats at WashU. He was the director of the scholarship program that I was a part of. And I told him about my frustrations with some of the things that happened to me at WashU. And he kept on telling me, well, sir, you don't come back for the buildings, you come back for the people. So it's because of people like Dean McLeod and people like Brother Chris Pepus that I am concerned about the welfare and the future of Washington University, and that it can be a more perfect union and a more inclusive vision. So I want to thank everybody for calling in and contributing to the conversation. And we're definitely going to have Brother Chris back on in the very near future. So this is National Jazz Appreciation Month. So in the words of my favorite person, one of my favorite people, the late, great Duke Ellington, we love you madly, and also keep on producing and pushing. With love, I am the artivist, signing off. Take care, everybody.